Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Reflections on Battle, written by AC-1308. General Taran eyed the map grimly. They always attack us from the east. Aye, sir. His aide leaned forward and tapped 3 different areas. Kalgugan, Stratus, and Masuris. Each of them had more men, better chargers, stronger cavalry. But these mirror knaves picked the terrain. They attacked from the east, a little after midday meal. Their archers walk behind a front row. And it is this front row that carries the polished shield. This was no idle maundering. Taran had the measure of his sword by now. Aye, sir, the aide said again. They look to have practiced turning the shield so that the sun can be reflected into the eyes of their enemy. Taran leaned back, his fingers combing through his grey beard. Has anyone attempted to press the attack on before midday meal? The aide nodded. It has been tried, sir. They simply fell back until the sun had turned and the foe was tired, then angled their shields to blind the enemy and attacked. The germ of an idea began to grow within Taran's head. Find me a valley, one that is not easy to climb out of, and make sure that it runs east to west. We'll make our stand there. The aide stared at him. Sir, they'll hunt us down and defeat us in detail. Taran smiled. I'm happy that you think so. I'll be needing one more thing. Sir? Standing, Taran stretched. Straw. Specifically, the straw that you get when stables are mucked out. Have it made into bundles. I'll need as many of them as I can get. Leaving the aide staring at his back, he strode from the tent. The day of the battle dawned clear and bright. Taran astride his horse, shaded his eyes and looked out over the hilly terrain that fed into the valley. A bright spark caught his eyes, and he nodded in satisfaction. Sir, his aide said, I think I just saw something. You did, agreed Taran. Our adversary is here, awaiting the hour of their demise. Of course, they don't know that. It still feels wrong, the young man said. Doing what our enemy wants, I mean. The poor general assumes his enemies aren't as intelligent as he is. Taran quoted from the Book of Swords. A good general acts as though they are his equal. A great general expects them to be smarter. And are they, sir? Smarter? Taran smiled. If they are, we'll not fight this day. The sun had slid past the zenith before the first reports began to come in. The Mirror-Knights, as they termed themselves, were advancing in phalanx, their highly polished shields and armor throwing back the afternoon sun into the eyes of Taran's forces. Taran ordered his command tent struck and loaded onto the wagon, then mounted his horse and rode out to see for himself. The light, he was forced to admit, was quite intense. Any warrior or archer staring into that glare would be nigh blind in a matter of minutes. Fortunately, his plans did not involve them standing and fighting under those impossible conditions. Fall back by companies, he said, the order going out by runner. Archers, shoot only 1 arrow at a time. Keep them honest. Do not attempt to stand and fight. These orders were followed. As the Mirror Knights advanced, Taran's forces pulled back along the valley. He watched the sun, and he watched the oncoming forces, but most of all, he watched for the signal that he was awaiting. Far back along the valley, thin plumes of smoke began to rise high up on each side. As each of the soldiers he'd hidden there saw the smoke, the signal that the Mirror Knights were entirely within the valley, they set to work with flint and tinder, lighting the bulky straw and manure bundles that had been carried up there in the dead of night. Halt! He called out. Stand to! We retreat no further. Archers, pick your targets, but hold your shots. His army stopped and turned from their desperate slog. Their general had promised them a battle this day. By all the gods, he was going to deliver. They held their shields ready, shading their eyes against the glare. The Mirror Knights, as they came along, must have wondered at the odd behavior of the retreating soldiers. Had they chosen to stand and die at last? They did not see their own creeping doom until it was far too late. As plume after plume of smoke rose, finally closing off the valley behind Taran's forces. The smoke rose into the air, spreading out into a gradually thickening haze that stood between the oncoming army and their greatest weapon, the sun. Tehran glanced over his shoulder to see the solar disk was naught but that bronze-colored circle in a dirty grey sky. Looking forward, he watched as the armor of those facing them became merely very reflective. He drew a deep breath. "Archers, draw!" Every archer under his command drew back and nocked an arrow, target long since selected. No longer needing to slit their eyes when having to look for their target, they grinned savagely, awaiting the next command. It was not long coming. "Loose!" Dozens of arrows leapt out towards the enemy ranks, not at the heavily armored front rank, but at the archers behind. At Tehran's command, another volley went through. Then he bellowed, "Make ready!" The archers stood down. In their place, the warriors readied their shields and drew their swords. They had been waiting for this. "Charge!" They charged. The Maronites, used to victory after victory, took a fatal moment too long to understand what was happening. And then it was too late. Much later, after the last sword fell and the last hands raised in surrender, General Tehran rode the battlefield. He had an interrogation to get to. Some of the higher officers in charge of the Maronites had been captured alive, and he was in the mood to ask questions. But for now, he wanted to savor the victory. "Let that be a lesson to you," he said, indicating where the raven perched on an overly reflective breastplate and pulled strings of meat from a dead owner. "It's something I learned long ago." "Sir?" his aide asked. Terence smiled. "Combat-ready troops are rarely inspection-ready, and inspection-ready troops are never combat-ready. Also, never trust anyone who polishes his breastplate that much." As his men chuckled dutifully, he put his heels to his horse and rode onward. End of story. Story number 2. Instincts, written by Echoing Cascade. Lorissa was overseeing the hunt. He had been a cleaner for the underground lords for many years now, and his crew had a 100% success rate. This was due in no small part to Lorissa's expertise in hunting. Some species hunted for food, others sport, some for pleasure, but his species hunted because it was all they knew. This morning he was given an urgent job. Take out an undesirable living alone in the late-night transfer shuttle at the main port of Stros Prime. He couldn't just kill the target as soon as they left the shuttle. Security was way too tight. Besides, weapons did not work inside the perimeter, so his crew would guide it to a designated kill zone. He will often make the mistake to try and get inside the head of the target, when it is much more reliable to use their instincts against them. He went over his plans he ready-made. If it's a predator species and seems somewhat cautious, using a larger predator from my crew to bully it into place would be the best. A tough-looking, sure-for-itself predator can be made to chase a weak predator that insulted it with ease. Lorazar looked at his watch and checked on every member of his crew to make sure that they were ready. If it's a prey species of the territorial type, spooking them will make them chase whatever frightened them. If it's not, the trick is to make it look like there has no way out, and then give them somewhat obvious escape route. Many of the hunt has failed when amateurs attempt to corner the prey. All game will fight if it feels it has no other choice, which is why the safest way to hunt a target is to kill it while on the run. The transferred shuttle arrived at last, and Lorisar watched for what kind of target would emerge, predator or prey. What he saw was a human male, wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. A large bipedal horse-like creature was sitting across the computer terminal, where Lorisar's face would be seen on the screen. "Explain to me why you cancelled the hit." Lorisar. "You neglected to say the target was a human, Trenos." Trenos. "So what if it's a human? I paid for the job and you failed me." Lorisar. "Do you know how the average human reacts to being stalked? Because I know it would have felt our presence eventually." Trenos wasn't expecting these questions, and it showed. Trenos. "I don't know. Run away." Lorisar. "Trick question. There is no such thing as an average human. A meek-looking individual may fight to the death over an imagined slight, just as well as a drop to its knees and beg for mercy. They are prey who learn to become predators on a death world. My crew doesn't hunt humans. They're too unpredictable. Trinus. Fine. I expect my money back, and mark my words, the other lords will hear of this failure. Lorissa nodded. Lorissa, do as you wish. Trenos was making his way back to the vehicle when he noticed his bodyguards were nowhere to be seen. He then noticed the noise or lack thereof. That bastard! He wouldn't dare, would he? He checked the streets and found that many of them had people, just out of sight and holding onto something like a weapon. Frack! I can't risk getting anywhere near them. There has to be. Trenos smiled as he saw a small back alley devoid of anyone, brightly lit, and ran for it. Lorissa aimed his plasma bolter at the running lord, held his breath, and pulled the trigger. You should have told me the target was a human, Trenos. You really should have. End of story. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Bezic, Try Again 95, Fudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Athelia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.